Didn't beep. Wow. Hey guys, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Hopefully you're there. It usually beeps for me, but yeah, today's session is on QHY PoleMaster. This is long overdue, an easier way to polar align, and this kind of is rocking the astrophotography world because, well, it's finally here. We've been waiting for this. But before we go into that, I did want to show off our image of the week, which actually goes to Hytham, his Witch Head Nebula, and you saw that, but here we go. This is Hytham's Witch Head Nebula, and if you've been paying attention, if you were on a couple weeks ago, you would have seen this, but it was good enough that we're going to show it to you twice, and I know Hytham is in the room, so Hytham, if you're there, you're welcome to tell us a little bit about the details of this.
Sure. So this is the Witch Head Nebula, as Adam stated, and just thanks a lot for the image of the week, guys. So this one was taken down at my remote observatory in New Mexico at Deep Sky West. So this was taken using an FSQ 106, not reduced at native focal length f5 with a FLI ML 16803 using Astrodon LRGB filters. It's a total of 18 hours worth of integration time, 9 hours of luminance alone with an additional 9 hours of RGB subs at 3 hours apiece. Each one of the sub-exposures were for luminance for 20 minutes, and for the RGB data is 15. Now, this is an object that I have wanted to image for an extraordinarily long time and just never had the chance to do so. You know, for my hemisphere in northern Minnesota, I shouldn't even say northern Minnesota, but in the northern part of the U.S. in Minnesota, I'm in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis. It is, you know, fairly low on the horizon. So once I had the opportunity to image it at somewhat of a higher altitude, I jumped all over it. This actually turned out to be quite a surprise to me. I never expected to get this much detail out of it. It was very much a shock. I never expected to even capture this much red. I had a hard time doing the composition for this at first because I couldn't decide on whether or not I wanted to keep, and I mispronounced it during my presentation badly, and I got my butt beat by my dad for doing so. But rijil, which means foot, it's colloquial Arabic, it's not formal Arabic, means foot or leg in Arabic, is just outside of the frame, and I couldn't remember if I wanted to put it inside or not, but being the bright star that it is, and with the giant image circle on the FSQ and such a large chip, you can still see it shining in from the left-hand side. One of the things that particularly surprised me about this image was the total number of faint little fuzzies that are found within the object itself. So it adds a really nice touch to it. I never really expected that, and even at you know, 3.5 arc seconds per pixel, I never thought I would be able to extract that kind of detail out of each one of those galaxies. It was great. It was a lot of fun processing it. It was very, very challenging, and definitely learned a lot, which is what I expect out of every new object that I image. And so with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about it, and thanks a lot for the image of the week, guys. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for submitting. And guys, remember, you can submit, yeah, there we go. Got my camera back. You guys can submit this in that thread that we keep resharing, and you'll be entered in, well, you'll be up for consideration. Wow, a lot of people in the room right now. That's crazy. This must be a popular topic, easy polar alignment. And I'm sorry, I didn't even introduce the presenter, Warren Sprang, who posts on cloudy nights as Rigel123 or Rigel123. It's one of those things. You read these things online and you never have any idea how to pronounce them. But I don't know. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Warren. And remember, guys, if you have questions, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot, the Q&A is enabled, and you can pretty much just type them in. I'll call them out to him, and we can run with it. So, Warren, I see you right there.
All right, I'll get the screen share going here. Hopefully.
Oh, now I see myself. You're doing the right thing.
Can you see my screen?
I see your screen, yes.
Okay, I'm going to minimize this. And let me open this up. All right, can you see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Well, I'd seen a post back in December about the PoleMaster and got really interested in it and started to see pretty decent reviews on it. So one of those things where, hey, I got to order this thing and try it because I'm tired of sitting on the ground and looking through the polar scope. And I'm one of those that I set up pretty much every night and tear down Every once in a while I can leave it up for a couple of nights if I know it's not going to rain. So, you know, having to pull or align every night gets to be somewhat of a pain and takes quite a bit of time, and was hoping that this little piece of equipment would speed things up. So this will be a fairly brief presentation because it does speed things up quite a bit. There were some questions earlier. First of all, you have to be able to see Polaris in order to use this, because it is a camera and it relies on, you know, seeing certain stars for the alignment, etc. It will also work in the southern hemisphere. They have stars set up for that, and it also has software that if you're below 30 degrees, they say that because of atmospheric refraction, it has a software program in there that will compensate for that. So this itself is the PoleMaster, and it's got the adapter on it for the Atlas for me, and then you get a 6-foot USB cord with it. This is what the adapter looks like on the Atlas itself, and the way it attaches, there are 3 small Allen wrench screws in here that go right in where the opening for the polar scope is. You tighten that in, and then it's got the thumb screw for actually holding the camera on. And that's what it looks like attached. So you've got the adapter here, the camera tights in. The adapter that comes with each one, you have to order the camera with the right adapter depending on if it's an Atlas, if it's an Ioptron, etc. They have different adapters out there, and I've been watching some of the posts on this. They continue to make new adapters, and some people are actually starting to make some of their own. But the adapter attaches with 3 screws, and then it goes in and just tightens in with this knob. Then if you download the instructions, it's funny. I downloaded the instructions before I bought this to read it, and as I read through the instructions, it was kind of like, gosh, I don't know how this thing's going to work. And once we get into the software, you'll see it's one of those. It's perfectly push here dummy. It's really easy to use, but it's nice. It has the screwed-in USB adapter, and they tell you to put it in this configuration. So it's, if you're facing the mount, the cord is facing to the left, and the reason they have it set up that way is so that when you adjust your altitude and your azimuth, altitude's up and down, azimuth is left and right, so it makes it easy to adjust when you're trying to align. And then this is my setup on the Atlas, and you can see the polar right here. When you open up the software, you see this screen, and basically all you do is you go up here to connect, and you click on connect, and when you do that, the camera starts. The first thing you'll notice is in about 3 to 5 years I'm going to have to do some tree trimming, or I'm going to be in some trouble here because it's going to hide the stars that I need. But once you start it, it tells you set the parameters to the left to make sure more stars are visible. So you can set the exposure, the gain, and make these stars that are over here a little bit brighter if you need to see them. Once you've made those adjustments, you click Finished, and you'll see that more stars are showing. At this point in time, these little red dots show up, and they're aligned here, but they may be over here off of these stars. What you do is you double-click on Polaris, they show up, you come over to this little slider, and when you slide it, these will rotate around the center. And what you try to do is line up these spots with the different stars. So you've got Polaris here, these are different stars. This is where it starts to do its calculations. This is the actual pole. Once you have these lined up, and I will make a point here, trying to move this with your cursor this way, it's almost impossible to get them lined up, so you can use your cursor keys on your keyboard, and that moves them back and forth easily, and you get those lined up pretty good. And all you need to see is that they are touching. It says that they don't have to be perfect, they just need to be in that. Then you hit Success, and then it asks you choose a star other than Polaris and double click it in the image. You want to remember that star because we're going to rotate that. So I would come down here, I would double click on this star, and then what it tells you to do is rotate your mount around your RA axis in this direction, and they want you to go at least 30 degrees. So I don't have EQ mod or anything set up on mine, so I use the hand controller. I rotate it up. You'll do that the first time. Once you've rotated it 30 to 45 degrees, you click Finished. It will go to star position 2, and it will ask you to rotate it another 30 to 45 degrees. Once you've rotated it another 30 to 45 degrees, you click Finished again, and it's going to put up this circle. And you'll see this little red spot right in the middle. That's where it's calculating that your mount's rotation, that's the center of your rotation of your mount, is. So then it asks you to move your scope back to the park position. You noticed in the back at this one, that's my park position. I just tell the scope to go back to park, and you watch this star follow this green line. As long as it stays on that green line, you know you're good. Once it gets back to park, it asks you to hit correct. You click on correct, and it shows you where Polaris should be, where the pole is, and where your center of rotation is. Then it asks you again to match these spots on those specific stars. So again, you rotate, and I use the cursor keys to get it on there. Once you get them aligned, you click on Success, and now it's going to tell you, okay, now use your altitude and azimuth bolts to move this green circle over Polaris. And you'll notice this little circle up here. This is a magnification area. If you take your cursor over this area, you're going to see the star magnified and the green circle as well. So going back and forth, you see it's over here. I would use my azimuth and my altitude bolts. I always put the cursor over it so I can see how well it's lined up. Once I get Polaris into that circle, it says as adjustment finished. You click Finished. That's doing the rough polar alignment. Again, these red spots come up. You rotate them one more time, get them aligned, and you'll see they're getting more to the center of each of the stars. Here's Polaris, here's the pole. Once you get those aligned, you click Success, and now it asks you to start monitor. And this is where you're going to do your fine polar alignment. And basically, you'll see here now the green circle, red circle are very close together because you've done a rough one. And again, putting the cursor over this area, you can see how close they are. You use your azimuth, altitude bolts again, you move it. And of course, if anybody's worked with an atlas, you know the altitude can be a little touchy. So I don't even loosen anything at this point because it's so close. I work the two bolts to get this as close as possible. Once you get to this point, and depending upon how your seeing is, this can dance around a little bit. Not too bad. The night that I've only done this 2 nights, that's how bad our weather's been. It dances a little bit, but in this position, it stays pretty good. You see I've got it pretty much aligned. At this point, you click Finished, and you're done. And at this point, you can leave this on if you want to, slew to your object, start your imaging, and you can go back and check on this screen to see how this is. Now, while it's tracking, and depending upon atmospheric refraction and how you're seeing is, this is going to be dancing back and forth, particularly over here in the magnified view. You'll see it going like this. But it usually comes to rest back and back, do like this and then come back again. And just to show you, so this was my tracking. I was doing 10-minute subs this evening. So this is my guiding from that evening. The difference here is 1 arc second. So you can see pretty good guiding on that. And then this is just a 10-minute sub. And then that was the image from that evening. So I was real happy with the stars. I was happy with the guiding. You know, I did this entire thing in 20 minutes, and I was doing screen captures and then putting it in Photoshop so I could make these slides. So that's how simple it is. And I have to be the first one to admit I don't know that I've ever gotten my polar alignment that good. And typically I was using the All-Star polar alignment in the Cinta hand controller. I never really felt it was really that good. With this, I'm guessing it's about 5 minutes once you start to finish to polar align, unless you're really way off from the North Star. So that's pretty much it, unless there's questions.
I have something I'd like to ask, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Sure.
So I'm sorry, Warren, that I stepped away just for a moment as you started the presentation and jumped back in just as you were discussing the adjustments to the RA axis on your system. Did you talk about how the PoleMaster itself is mounted directly to your Atlas? Do you have a special adapter? Did you have to have one made?
Yeah, right now. Right now, if you go on to QHY's website and look up PoleMaster, they have an entire list of the adapters they have. I know they have one for the Atlas, for the Sirius. They have one for Ioptron. They have one for the, I think it's the Celestron. And I know some guys, if you look on, there was one long thread on Cloudy Nights on the beginner. It's now about 15 pages long on this. You'll see some guys have started machine tooling their own. It does not have to be centered like that. It's nice on the Atlas because it's, I think that's where they first came up with this, because it's the first adapter shown. And I'll just go back real quick. This attaches where the polar scope, opening is. You take off that little plastic cap, and then there are 3 Allen wrench screws that tighten up and hold this there, so you don't have to do this each time. It's capped like this, and then the PoleMaster just fits in here and is tightened in with this thumb screw. So that's how it looks.
Thank you. Do you find that it's a fairly solid platform? It doesn't move around very much?
It doesn't move at all. As a matter of fact, I'd mentioned about leaving it hooked up when you're imaging, so you can actually check your polar alignment. I mean, that's one of the beauties of this. If you're imaging and you leave this attached and you happen to bump your mount, all you have to do is all the dots are still there. You just have to line them back up again, and you're back to your polar alignment because you've set it that way. As a matter of fact, if you leave your mount out, when you turn this on and you've done it once, it will ask you, would you like to leave it as it was? Now, when I do it, because it's out, because I move it around and say I leave it up and I redo it. I mean, it's the 2 times I've done it, when I left it out overnight, there was barely any movement whatsoever. Now once I get it done, because my cable management isn't the best, I go ahead and detach it because I'm expecting not to run into my mount, etc. If I do, hey, I'll redo it. But it's really, it takes that quick, and it is interesting. When I first got this, and like I said, when I downloaded the instructions, I thought this sounds difficult, but I mean, the way they've done the instructions on screen, you can't mess it up. It's a thing of beauty.
Is there any need to, I think you answered it, but is there any need to have it orthogonal to the mount, or do you just literally screw that adapter in and you're good?
That's it. I looked that up, Adam. As a matter of fact, they said it does not, it surprises me. They say it does not have to be orthogonal to your mount center, that it calculates. I mean, it's funny because I think about that because I've seen guys that have attached it off to the side, and I guess, it's such a distance, it's not that big a deal, where the rotation is. I kind of feel good that it's right at the center of my mount. So I like it that way.
Hey Adam, I'll weigh in on that too, because I made an adapter for it where you could actually mount it up on top of your scope on a dovetail on top, and essentially it just doesn't matter where it is because of the way you're actually rotating your entire axis. So you can either mount it on the polar axis or you can mount it on a dovetail on top. You can turn it sideways, you know, so that it's not actually, if you want to turn your whole scope sideways so that you're not running into the pier as you're rotating the mount, then you can mount it up on top that way. But it just doesn't matter. It's very robust and can deal with that very well in the software. So one of the other questions earlier was, does it matter, you know, if one screw is pushed in more than the other screw or something like that? And it doesn't, but what does matter is that it's just very rigidly mounted wherever it's mounted, because if it's flexing or rotating at all while you're actually moving your mount, then obviously, you know, it'll kind of throw off the whole calibration of the thing.
Right.
Wow, that's really cool. Warren, have you ever measured how close you are to polar alignment?
No, I did watch. There's a video out there on YouTube, and I cannot remember the guy's name, but he did. I mean, he did one live, and he used PhD and you know, showed the and he was within like 15 arc seconds. You know, it claims to be within 0.30 15 arc seconds. He was at 0.15.
Wow.
Yeah. It was one of the things I did. You know, typically after my polar alignment, I'll run like a 1 minute or 2 minute unguided sub just to see how my stars look. I figured if I get 1 or 2 minutes on an atlas and they're round, I'm good. This was giving me 5. And this atlas is, I looked it up today, 5 years old this month, out of the box, never touched. I haven't even done PEC to it.
That's cool. Alex is asking, does using this hinder you if you want to, for some reason, use your old polar scope? Do you have to remove the, and I'm guessing this is Atlas specific for the time being, but I'm guessing the question is, can you just take the camera off and see through the little hole with the polar scope?
You'll notice here's the adapter. You'll know this is open.
Mm-hmm.
So you could use the polar scope if you wanted to. You just cap it, you know, it's capped similarly. You take that off, this is an open hole, and you just have a flange on the camera itself that goes in here and fits in, this tightens down. So if you wanted to use the polar scope, just take it off.
Yep, that's cool. And no, you can adjust your azimuth and your altitude in kind of one iteration, right? You just...
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the cool thing. When let's see, we'll get down here to where you basically, it's doing all this for you. It shows you exactly where the stuff is. So you move that green circle over Polaris, and you've got a rough polar alignment to start out with, and you just take it one more step to get the that one for the pole, and that's the fine. So, like I said, I mean, with the instructions that they put in the software, it was probably one of the easiest things I've done in this hobby.
And I think Tolda's asking, let's see, have you tested the alignment with another method? I think that's similar to my question, how close were you? And also, can you use a different QHY camera with a C-mount lens instead with the software?
That was, and I can't remember who was talking about mounted on the iOptron. I know he's been in the same thread. Somebody had talked about that, and there has been discussion that it's the software. I think if you can adapt the camera, I mean, this has got a 25mm lens on it. So you've got your field of view is 11 by 8 degrees, I believe is what the software says. So as long as you can get the software and adapt your camera, I'm assuming it could work. I don't know if anybody else has any comments on that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because I know some people are looking at the. I mean, the one discussion I saw was, well, I'd really like to have a camera that does double duty, could guide, could do planetary, etc. Because I mean, the camera is a similar type. It's USB powered. It's very rapid because basically you're getting a live shot here for the most part. It's moving in real time when you go to do the adjustments. There's not a delay, so you don't, when you're making your adjustments, you don't go past typically. You can see it moving as you're adjusting the bolts.
Would you mind pulling up the picture of the camera again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually.
Sorry if I'm.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry if I missed it, but somebody I was talking to on Cloudy Nights actually did get the not the PoleMaster to work as a guide camera, but somebody got the QH5L2 mono to work as a PoleMaster, and so they used the software for the PoleMaster with that, and they put one of those little lenses on it, and we're able to get it to work that way.
Yeah.
That's not a 1.25. Well, no, obviously not, because it has a lens on the end, right?
Right.
Does that unscrew? So maybe you could screw in a 1.25 and possibly, because is it the same sensor as the, what is it, the QHY 52L?
I don't know that I've seen any information on the actual sensor, Adam, as to what they're using. This sleeve does screw off. That one thing I didn't mention. These are focused at the factory, and mine was perfectly focused when I used it. But if yours is not, you can take this sleeve off, and then there's some Allen screws that you loosen, turn the top till you get a good focus, then you tighten those back down again. And that might be 1.25 underneath this.
Mm-hmm. Just got a question. Is this as good as drift alignment?
Well, like I said, if you go to YouTube and do a search on PoleMaster, there's about I want to say it's about a 12, 14-minute video where this guy does it live, and I mean follows exactly that. And then he follows it up with doing PhD and doing showing you what your alignment is, and it starts out at about 1 minute, and it drops. As it settles down, he gets down to that 0.30, and then it drops even lower. So I think he was kind of surprised himself. It's one of those things that, like I said, you have to be able to see Polaris, and if you've got a permanent setup, whether or not is it worth the $300 to spend on this. But if you set up all the time and you do a lot of going out to dark sites and everything, I mean, taking 30 minutes to polar line or 5 minutes and not having to sit down on the ground and peer through the scope and do all the different iterations, I'm real happy with it.
Yeah, just to give, I forget who asked that question. Actually, lit up my phone and it didn't pop up in Q&A. But when I drift align with PhD, they say 2 arc minutes is really good, and I've been lucky sometimes. Sometimes I get half an arc a minute, but if you're getting those numbers, I mean, that's amazing. That's really, really good.
Yeah, their claim is the best is 0.3 arc second, or arc minutes, 0.3 arc minutes, 30 arc seconds.
Right.
I think the real answer is that with almost all those Chinese mounts, unless you upgrade the azimuth and altitude adjusters, that it's more accurate than you can actually adjust the mount.
Right.
Anyone who has an Atlas knows how sticky all that can be, and you can't adjust it finer than this software will let you do.
Yeah, one of the things I mentioned about the Atlas, one of the things I did, it was probably the best change I did make to it for the azimuth, I took a plastic folder and cut it so I put it in between the tripod and the mount. That makes it so much, I don't have to loosen this at all. It's really smooth that way. Now the altitude bolts, everybody knows those are fun. But for the azimuth, just taking a thin piece of plastic, putting them between the two of them, really smooths that up a lot.
Yep, absolutely. That or a Delrin spacer or something like that.
Right.
And they sell upgraded bolts that are easier to hold on to. If you really care and you're setting up a lot with a tripod, TPI Astro up in Canada sells the level adjuster feet, which are really nice because you have those big giant knobs and you can, do one big turn to move it just a tiny bit in the polar scope. But that's really the only way that you could actually get that fine of adjustments.
Right.
Edward Overstreet is making a comment that the written instructions are a little bit poor.
Yeah, they're horrible.
But he's also saying you don't really need them because you just follow the on-screen, like you said.
Yeah.
And looks like he's happy with his.
I got another quick question. I'm sorry if this was already mentioned in the beginning as well. Actually, I have two questions, and I'm really sorry. Both have been mentioned in the beginning. But the first one is, does this work in the southern hemisphere?
Yes, they do. It is a matter of fact. Again, I'm trying to think where I saw it. There's a screenshot. Well, as a matter of fact, if we go here, you'll see south or north. So you tell it which one, and it uses different stars, of course.
Oh,
if you're
okay.
in the south. And then one of the other things I mentioned, if you missed that, if you're below 30 degrees, they basically, when you look at the specifications for this, it originally said to be used above 30 degrees latitude, but they've recently, the newest software upgrade, they actually compensate for atmospheric refraction. That's under tools, and it adjusts, it makes the calculation based upon what latitude you're at if you're below 30 to adjust for where the pole actually is.
Cool. The second question I had, is this ASCOM capable? Does it have an ASCOM driver for it?
I don't know that. I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about going through the iterations of this, when it asks you to move the mount, of course, you can either use, if you're driving your scope by ASCOM, you can make the movements that way. As to whether or not it can be run, when you're running ASCOM, just pull it up. That I don't know.
Okay.
What do you mean by that? Is there a button you can click to rotate? Is there an on-screen button you can click to rotate it to 30 degrees, or no?
No, you would have. Matter of fact, the video I was talking about on YouTube, he uses ASCOM, and he just pulls up his controller for his mount. I don't know I think it might be an Atlas also, and he just hits the east button and rotates the mount for when it asks to rotate at 30 degrees.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you're still going to be right there by your mount, so it's not like you're going to be doing this from inside the house. You still have to turn your altitude and azimuth knobs.
Right. Yeah. And you'll hear him. He says, "Give me a minute," and you hear Russell as he's adjusting things to do things on it.
And the main reason why I was asking, and Adam just hit it right on the head, because I'm thinking more along the lines of being able to, say, team this up with an automatic, polar alignment system, a mechanical polar alignment system, something that will adjust your altitude and your azimuth with you. So based on the input that it receives from PoleMaster, it just supplies it directly to, say, like an Arduino controller would be something that I would think of, and doing it that way. It'd be cool to see that.
Or the Merlino.
Is the Merlino the Italian-made scope?
That's the Avalon Auto Polar Alignment thing. Yeah. Yep, it would be awesome to. I don't know if they use something similar or the same software for that, but it's essentially what they do.
Yeah, that's what I would love, like a la, what do you call it? Oh my gosh, the Pen Pro. now that they finally moved over to ASCOM, like something similar, so you could use their polar alignment tool, tie it to an ASCOM camera, tie it to an ASCOM-based mount that's got the mechanical adjusters, and have your entire system polar aligned for you before you even get a cup of coffee. I know I'm dreaming, but that'd be neat.
Never hurts.
Yeah.
Well, this way you could polar align remotely if you're in an earthquake zone or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm seeing a big problem with this system. It appears that they're not in stock anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. That is. They have been going out like crazy. When I ordered mine, there was no issue. But then I started seeing people talking about 1 month waits for this thing now.
And I'll tell you, this obviously it makes a really difficult routine easy. But if you're in the southern hemisphere, this seems like a no-brainer. If you don't have Polaris, it seems like it would make it a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen the screenshots of it. You know, and it picks different star. You have a star field, and it shows you what star field you need to be going towards, and you're doing the same thing with those red spots, is just aligning those particular stars. You don't necessarily need Polaris in that. You do need stars, but from that standpoint, you don't have to have a star that's that close to the pole.
All right, so let me ask you this question. If you were a brand newcomer to astrophotography and you barely understood the whole Polaris polar aligning thing, and you plunked it down facing roughly north, would you still be able to make it work? It'd still work just the same, right?
I think so, because I mean this is the field you see it for. I mean, of course I've got marks on my patio, so I know I'm pretty much facing north, but as long as you know your latitude and you can adjust your mount to within a few degrees of what your true latitude is, and you use something to face roughly north, and when you've got this big of a field of view, and Polaris is pretty easy to spot, and I think that you plop this in, I think that person could be within better polar alignment than I have in 6 years I've been doing this.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is when I shoot from my house here, Polaris is basically the only star that I can see in that region. But I've gone to a dark site, and I've actually been confused because there's so many stars in that region, and I can't figure out where Polaris is because there's so many stars up there.
This would tell you pretty quickly, because if none of your stars match in these spots, oh, I got the wrong star.
Right. Yeah, this hobby's getting easier and easier. Tolga's asking if there's an adapter for the G11.
Matter of fact, I saw a question about that. I have not seen one for that. The more that QHY gets questions about this, there are people out there that are tooling these things for it. And it depends on some of the mounts, or some of the adapters can be used on different mounts, because it's going to depend upon the size of this. If they have an opening in the front where there's a polar scope, people are going to make adapters, so all it has to do is be able to hold the camera. And basically all this is, I don't have a good picture of it's a beveled base adapter that fits in here, so it's just held on that way, but it's solid. You'll see they do have 2 other set screws to make sure that it's held in nice and tight.
I wonder, has anyone 3D printed one of these yet?
That's what I made, Adam. I made probably two.
Yeah, I thought you had.
Yeah, like 2 dozen of those ones, so you can put it up on the top dovetail. The CGEM, the Atlas, and the AVX are all within 1 millimeter of each other. I think they're 34.5, 35, and maybe 34 millimeters. So I suspect that they probably would all work on an Atlas. I don't want anyone to buy it based on that, but you know, if it's 34 and the Atlas opening is 35, you could put a piece of tape around it and it would fit in there nice and snug. And you just pop those set screws through. But those are all about the same size.
Jeff Siebert is asking, on the screen there was a circular green arrow to indicate the direction of the 30-degree turn. Does it tell you east or west, or does that even matter?
Well, you're going east, but as long as when you start to move your scope, as long as it's going in this direction, if you're hitting the wrong key and you see it go this way, just change keys and go to the other direction. And of course, if you're hitting the wrong ones and you're moving the declination, you're not going to see any motion. So that's why I say it's pretty much press here, because you just want to watch the star moving in this direction. So you hit whatever keys you can until it starts moving this way. And then really the only thing you have to estimate is, okay, if I move from here to here, is that about 30 degrees? You can take it 45 degrees. It just says a minimum of 30 degrees. And you'll do that twice. So I moved it here, and then you'll see in the next shot it's been moved over here, and then that's when you hit park or move your scope back to park, and it's easiest in my case. I just go back, say park the scope, and you watch this rotate and have the star follow this green circle, and that's just telling you aligned well with your center of rotation. And if that's off, you hit reset and you do it again.
And you said it took you 5 minutes to polar align and to do this presentation.
No, 20 minutes to polar align and do the presentation.
Okay.
If I had just been starting and go through this, it's about 5 minutes.
Wow. Not sure. Edward Overstreet. Bresser EX052, that's a mount, right? I don't know if that's a question whether it's compatible with that. I'm not quite sure.
I haven't heard of that one.
Maybe he was Googling something and he typed it into Q&A.
Oh.
Maybe. I don't know. I think Bresser's a mount though. I'm not quite sure.
Did you guys say that the camera can be?
Oh yes. The mount support is Bresser EX052 AVX CGEM. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, whoever I interrupted.
Hey, this is Sean. Did you guys say that the camera could be somewhere else, like on the dovetail?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Who was it was talking about they made a thing to mount it basically on top of the scope.
Yeah, that was me. Sean, I just put it in a little kind of, I mean, you could even use like a little guide scope ring to hold it in there rigidly up on top of a dovetail, and it'll work fine.
So orthogonality doesn't matter. Is that right?
Correct.
So it seems like this software could be adapted to be used on, regular camera and lens mounted on your mount.
That's what I think. It has to have the same focal length, I think.
Right.
But somebody was telling me that they used the QH5L2 with a lens and were able to make the software work with it.
Doesn't seem like it would be a big jump then to make it work with your main imaging camera.
Well, then your field starts getting really small and it gets really tough. Part of what's so beautiful about this is that the field's so huge that it can really help you out. If you go to your main imaging camera and you're down to a much smaller field of view, then your exposures have to be longer too. So it's because you have to go to deeper stars.
Right.
Sure. I mean, you could get there, and it could definitely be done to some extent with a main imaging camera. But I don't think with this software it can. But software could do it, and I think that people have wrote some software to do that with imaging cameras as well.
All right. So let me think about this. You put it on top of your dovetail, right? So your telescope has to be pointing basically at Polaris. right?
Well,
Does it dovetail, or does it go elsewhere?
the PoleMaster has to be sort of pointing at Polaris. It doesn't matter where your telescope is pointing, but just generally at Polaris, and then you rotate around your RA axis.
Yeah. So if you mount it up here, this is the orientation. That's what he's saying, is it wouldn't matter.
Right. Or you could turn your telescope sideways and have Polaris pointing, or the PoleMaster pointing at Polaris sideways off your scope. Because all it's doing is rotating around the RA axis. So as it's rotating around the RA axis, it's essentially the same thing if you're turning it on the RA axis or if you're rotating it around the RA axis. It's essentially doing exactly the same thing.
So you actually get, if you do it that way, you can actually get kind of an electronic finder scope on your scope as well, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
With a 20mm lens, that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and Warren can attest to this. The image that comes out of there is pretty sharp. It comes out pretty clean, and that camera's pretty sensitive. I mean, you don't have to try too hard to see some stars pretty crisp.
No. As soon as I turn it on, what you see here when you first turn it on, they're fairly dim, but you can still see them. Then you can adjust it up here to get them a little bit brighter. I think I went up to 100 to get them a little bit brighter, but I mean they're pretty nice.
Does it limit you to that 300 millisecond exposure? Is that the max?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, OPT, I can't share a link with you guys out there, but if you go to OPT, they have a drop-down, and you can see all the supported mounts. Andrew Wall is asking if anybody has seen seen a video demonstration of this in the Southern Hemisphere.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I have not seen one yet. I mean, I Googled this a bunch. I have not seen one on the Southern yet.
We're getting a comment on it that it is important that it's important which direction the USB cable faces. When facing the PoleMaster, the cable needs to exit on the left. So if you install it upside down, you're making a mistake.
Well, it really, the reason they have you do that is so when you're adjusting, your azimuth is left, right, altitude's up, down. But if you have to use the atmospheric refraction software, it has to be this way.
Mm-hmm. That's a really cool little gadget.
It is nice. Only being able to get out with it twice is killing me. As a matter of fact, it started clearing up, and I thought, oh, I could really make Adam's night. I'll do it live.
Never works out that way.
I thought better of that.
Yeah. Then we'd see what could really go wrong.
That's right.
That's really cool. Well, I'm going through all the questions. I don't know if anyone else in the room or outside the room has any questions. Now's your chance, guys. I'm going to go through them one more time. Let's see. Yeah, I think we have covered everything.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, just to jump back on something just really, really quickly. Again, so this is just regarding it has to see Polaris, so could it just simply do, or could it not do, and I think I'm taking it into the realm of now just creating sky models and just taking a look at drift and then accounting for the drift just based on the stars that it has taken, or do a plate solve and then do that. I think that might be just out of the realm of its capability, but it does require Polaris, must be somewhere in there. I know it was answered quite clearly, but in my head I'm just thinking there's got to be another way of doing it without having to have Polaris.
The issue with it is when you go to do your rough alignment, it's on Polaris.
Okay.
It's not, you won't once you go to move this over, those red dots on the other stars, for whatever reason, you could see all this but Polaris. When you go to move it, those red spots, so you only have Polaris to line up on.
Okay. All right. I don't see it as a limitation, but I'm just thinking of those poor individuals that are imaging from their backyard and have either a gigantic tree or their home or a spotlight sitting right in the direction they need to point. I was just wondering if that would be at all possible, just to be able to use a sky model of some sort to do that then instead.
I should mention my skies are Bortle 6 red zone. My SQM measures my zenith at 18.7. So wow. You can see how bright it is because you can see the tree.
Oh, great. You know what? We just got shared into the comments of this video the live demo of it. That video on YouTube, that's a live demo. So if you want to see it in action, you can see it there. And somebody's asking, do you need a go-to mount for it?
You could, I assume you could do this by hand. Would make it a little bit difficult. And they suggest that's one part of the manual that was readable. The problem with moving by hand, of course, is it going to be a smooth motion, and you want that. I mean, if you're not using a go-to, you may not be using it for photography anyway. It's going to get you close enough if you're rotating by hand rather than a mechanical method.
Yeah, there's some other a comment. I'm not sure what it's in response to. Even with a good polar alignment, one would still need to calibrate the go-tos.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay, do go-to alignments. Yeah.
Yeah, they claim that you can do a 1-star, and I will say when I had done this alignment, I still do a 3-star alignment, and everything was really close to the crosshairs. When I would go to the first go-to as well. So I noticed things were different right away.
Well, those of us with astrophysics mounts, we only have 1-star alignments, basically. So, yeah, polar alignment and then 1-star alignment, and you're good, and your go-tos are going to be pretty close.
Yeah.
So I can see why that would work. Okay. There was a little while there I thought this was going to be a really short presentation, but there seems to be a lot of excitement, and we've had a ton of people in the room. There's 41 viewers right now, and we had up to 48, I think. So this QHY is onto something with this one.
I think so.
All right.
All right, I'll give you back the screen.
Yeah. All right. Well, Warren, thank you very much for presenting that. I think for those of you that are on Cloudy Nights, I know there is a thread on this. That's where I started reading about it, and I think you know, this isn't just for beginners. This could make a lot of people's lives a lot easier. So I don't know. Any other comments on it inside the room? If there aren't, and there aren't any outside the room, I'm going to thank everyone for coming. And basically, I think we'll see you next week. I do not have anything scheduled yet for next week. I'm working on a few things. There have been some requests for imaging challenges again, although I don't think we're going to do that next week, but I might. Keep your eyes on Google Plus, and we'll post something midweek, and you'll see it. Otherwise, there's no other comments. I'm going to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.